feeling is. If you're not sure, then probably not yet lah. Lagi sikit lah. But you can know when you're on the way. And that's what I was talking about just now. Because it's a path. It's not a physical path, even the whole idea of the Eightfold Path, the Buddha talked about Magga, the path. But it's a practice, it's a way of practice. And it's a gradual path, it's a gradual training. The Pali, for those of you who like Pali, is Anu Upasikha, the gradual training where you get one step comes after the next step, the following on steps of the training. And when you're on the right path, gradually walking along, your dukkha, your experience, your feeling of suffering goes down bit by bit by bit by bit. And so, in a sense, you don't need to worry about whether you're enlightened or not, or how you know when you know. Because the important thing is to be on the path. The important thing is to be walking. And you'll know when you're on the right. Like I said, you just ask yourself, how does it feel? Is my feeling getting better? I mean, do you know what happiness feels like? If you know, then that's what, you know. But I'm talking about true happiness, you understand, more of an inner happiness. We all know what sensual happiness feels like. You know, do you know what suffering feels like? If I say hands up, who has ever cried? Hands up, anybody cried? Okay, we can hand up. So we all know what suffering feels like. It's not some mysterious experience. The Buddha was not talking about dukkha, it's not a Pali term. Dukkha is very real, we all know it. You know, no need to wonder what dukkha is. It's, you know. So it is a good, you know, it's the question, I think we should put it more like, say, how do we know that we're on the right path? You know? And I think that's okay. You can look into your heart, look into your feelings. Or if you're married, you can ask your husband or your wife, am I less stressed now? How am I doing? They'll tell you, you know, or your children. You know, because you feel it, you know. You know, you feel better. You have a wholesome sense of, it's like a wholesome pride. It's not like ego, conceit, like I'm a great guy. But it's just this feeling of like, yes, good, carry on. You know, like if you're working and you do a nice project, you know you've done a good job. That's not ego, there's nothing wrong with that. You should acknowledge that, say, yes, good, carry on, keep going, this feels right, this feels good. But the point is this, is that it's hard for people to know, right? It's hard for us to, in many ways in daily life. People always say, well, what's right, what's wrong, I don't know what to do. But that's the point of having things like centers like this, or having teachings, or keeping precepts. So I just say to you, look, if you just keep the precepts, if you just train yourselves in mindfulness, if you can just be generous, then I can guarantee you're on the right path. At least that's from my experience. What I can say is that from my experience, you don't have to worry. That's on the right path. So that's the point. The Buddhas, the teachers, the Sangha, your friends, your parents, the whole point is that they're more or less there to encourage us, to keep us going in the right direction. In the world, it's school, and then it's job, and then it's family. You've got to get it right. You've got teachers, you've got co-workers, you've got family to keep you going. In the Dhamma, you've got the Sangha, you've got meditation teachers, you've got your Kalyana Mitta. So take advantage of that. Don't be too individualistic. Come to the group, keep listening to the Dhamma, practice meditation, go on courses. Then, as long as it's, you know, as long as they're good teachers or good places, you're basically being what we could say, you're being nurtured along by the support network. So keep coming here, basically.
Mike, please. Could you please, for those who want to like to ask a question, can you just show your
hand? In recent years, I have seen a lot of lay people who suffer illnesses for a short period of time and they pass away. And at the same time, I have seen very good practitioners. They have very serious illnesses and they suffer quite a lengthy period before they pass away. I mean that some good practitioners that we know, they have a lengthy period of sickness before they pass away. What is it, the difference between the two? Thank you.
Okay. These kind of questions, I think essentially people are asking about the law of karma. How does it work? Why is this happening the way it's happening? It just doesn't seem right, it doesn't seem fair, I just don't understand it. And that's quite correct. It's not possible for any of us to understand. And the way the Buddha taught the law of karma was also very clear. So I think it's from my understanding, it's good to get clear on that. The simplest way to put it is that the causes and conditions, the how and the why leading up to any event is so complex and it varies so much. And in Buddhism, as I'm sure you know, the law of karma is also woven into a concept of many lives. It's a bigger picture. I mean, even one life is complicated enough, right? Even just one life, you would never be able to predict. You see, if you ask a doctor, okay, this person has, lung cancer, this person has lung cancer, they're basically the same. We're gonna do the op. Who's gonna come out better? It may well be that the person who looks better, the doctor said, well, this person is stronger, younger, fitter, the cancer's less aggressive. Sometimes that's the one who dies. And the old guy, the guy with the, a really aggressive cancer, he's the one who survives, he's still there, 95 and smoking away. How did that work? My grandfather, 95, yeah, 2 packets every day, 40 stick lah, It's just not fair. So when we want to talk about karma in Buddhism, because we can't really understand it, it's just a concept. You just have to say, yeah, it's a mystery. And then if you want to think in terms of a whole previous, because the Buddha said, karma or the vipaka means the results. You should really understand karma is the actions, the vipaka is the results. So the vipaka, the results of the karma, can manifest right now, sometime later in this life, or sometime future. Like that's the concept, that's the principle. So if you want to talk about karma, you have to have the whole package. You see, you can't just simplify it. So when you understand it like that, then you understand, oh yeah. Basically what it means is that it's just way too complicated to have such a simplistic, linear and immediate result. He's a good person and he died. This is a really nasty person and he lived long, had a beautiful wife and became president. It's just not fair. It's just not fair. But that was actually what the Buddha said, like life is dukkha. So, even, analyzing these things. But it's like this, it's like, Ajahn Chah, our teacher, he said some people ask me this and they think, yeah, I don't trust the law of karma because good people seem to suffer and sometimes really nasty people seem to be successful. But Ajahn Chah's answer was, well, they don't understand the meaning of do good and you receive good, do evil, you receive, or do harm, you receive harm. He said, I've never done a good thing and I didn't feel good about it. So you get it straight away. He said, I've never done a harmful thing without feeling bad. So if you understand that it's also the feeling, the internal feeling, which nobody can see, then you see that there's something operating that you can't know. So how those people feel. So it's like studies, you know? You can have two students. You've got the top student, works really hard, generally gets A's. When the exams are coming, working really hard, as like usual, expected to pass or get A's with flying colours. And you get another student not so good, or maybe not so good in the past, maybe tries really hard the last week. Another student, middling. It happens sometimes that the straight A student, the really, really good student, doesn't do so well. Some days you just don't perform so well. Some days the really kind of lazy guy, the cheeky guy, manages to win. Could be fluke it, could be that they just got it right in the last 24 hours. I'm sure some of us have done that before. Go for it. The point is you can't predict these things, can you? If predictions work, we'd know everything. We'd know the horse racing results, we'd know the exam results in advance, we'd know medical results. If you look at the world, it's really difficult to predict things. So the things you're talking about, actually, it's in line with the way the world works. You don't need the Buddha to tell you, you'll never figure it out. It's like Bhante told me yesterday that the famous typing pastime is betting on what time it's going to be. Is that right? So I was very happy that yesterday and today we got rain. I feel like I'm typing, looking at the sky, and it's probably 7:20. But the point is, you can't really predict it, can you? Like even the most expert typing rain predictor, the most skilled, sometimes they just get it wrong, Sometimes, have you ever had it just, it's building up, the sky's black, it's humid, and then it just passes through, it doesn't rain. It happens, you say, how did that happen? So that's the point. And I think it's a really good thing to then understand in our lives, because otherwise we're just going to expect it to go in a certain way. And also in practicing Dharma, we'll think the law of karma provides guarantees. Okay, we just do the right thing. It doesn't. Actually, it's still very much pointing to an uncertain principle in terms of results. But overall, you can see that it's a correct one. That overall, if you do the right thing, when you apply it inside, that's what I said earlier on, you can't change old age, sickness and death. This Dharma, the Buddha was never teaching people to practice and cure cancer or practice and live long. Those might be the results. But the whole point, what we should really be talking about is, I'm suffering right now. How can I go beyond that? And that, like I said, I can guarantee you do the right thing, you get the results. Because that's something which is within your sphere, you could say your sphere of influence. The medical staff, the weather, that's beyond anyone. We can try our best, but you have to let go on that.
Thank you. Can we have the brother here to ask this question? Okay.
Sometimes we lack the motivation and discipline to meditate, and there's a lot of teachers teaching different styles of meditation. So what's your advice on that?
Whereas what?
What's your advice?
What's my advice? Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm very lack of motivation. I'm very confused. So many teachers. The advice is this: basically, there's no shortcut. There's no special trick. With regarding meditation, first, Ajahn Chah's advice was the best. When you're lazy, start like this. When you're inspired, when you have motivation, meditate. When you're feeling lazy, when you don't have motivation, when you're uninspired, meditate. It sounds funny, but it's serious. I mean, who feels like going to work every day, right? But you've got to go, right? I mean, okay, some people maybe phone in sick, but basically, whether you're in the mood or not, you go to work, you go to school, you you do the cooking, you go to the market. So the point is with meditation, you just haven't prioritized it enough. The key is to, like with all of these things, your motivation and your inspiration and your effort to meditate is not actually just a cause, it's also a result. You understand? It's the fruit of what comes before it. So what you have to do is prioritize meditation in your life. That's what I was saying. It's like, look, realize that we're bound up with old age, sickness and death. Realize that at any moment things are going to happen which really make you suffer, and that meditation is your path to liberation. You see, like if you knew you were in prison and I gave you the key and I said, there's the door, would you lack the motivation to open the door and walk out? You wouldn't. But it's the same with this. Look, you've got to see that you're in prison. That's why the Buddha said dukkha, suffering, has to be fully understood. You've got to keep looking at why you're suffering. Because basically you're like me, you're quite relaxed, kind of happy-go-lucky, life's cool, you know, no problems, basically. We've got to like motivate ourselves and say, look, don't think like, don't be heedless. Realize that, you know, there is this suffering, and there's a greater freedom. There's something more than this which we can realize. You see, so that's the thing, is that we have to cultivate this perspective, right perspective, as to why do you want to meditate in the first place, you know. So that's the first thing. Regarding all these various techniques, in a sense, it's very difficult to say which is the best one, because I think generally most of them have their benefits. All I can say is try, but the point is, rather than dabbling and doing a bit of this and that, try one. The point is, you've got to really do it. It's not enough just to kind of like be interested in meditation. You know, like some people say, yeah, I'm interested in, I like Tai Chi, or I like yoga. You've got to really do it. You know, and it's like Tai Chi, which form do you do? Short form, long form, this school, that school, you know? Yoga, all of these things, the same. Diet, you know, all kinds of diet, you know. But generally a diet, even various diets, the point is they all have their benefits, but you have to take it on and stick to it, and then see after a while, does it work for you? You know. So I don't want to get into, you know, whether you do Vipassana or Goenka or Mahasi or Ajahn Chah. He didn't have much of a technique. There's people often ask, what's the Ajahn Chah style? And there's not much of a style. Basically being in the present moment, calm the mind, contemplate aging, sickness and death, just try and abandon the past and the future. But a lot of the Ajahn Chah technique or the method is lifestyle. You see, it's precepts, it's being honest, being restrained, limiting, reducing your craving in daily life. And then you come to meditation, you're in a much better place. So when people talk about meditation, it's much more than just, you know, sitting cross-legged or going to a course. It's your whole life. Bhavana, which we translate as meditation, really means growth or development or cultivation. You know, becoming in the wholesome way, becoming, growing. So it's what I've been talking about this whole evening. Abandon evil, do good, train your mind. The technique, you know, there's so much out there, so many different. Go try something, stick with it, see if it works. But you've got to really do it, and that's the motivation.
Thank you, Ajahn.
Can we have the mic in front? Oh, okay, one more.
Bande, I would like to ask a question about keeping precepts. Yeah. Let's say we do not kill, but we do kill in video games, like shooting games and etc. So in terms of keeping precept, does it still keeping it, or are we like breaking the precept already? And the second part of it is in terms of like, if we do it in the mind, and if we do it out physically, what's the difference in terms of karma, the effect? Like,
can I just clarify, when you said like shooting games, do you mean like...
I mean computer games.
Oh, computer games. I think I'm pretty sure that certainly it's certainly different. Like being on the computer game and shooting game, that way you're killing your enemy or something. Definitely different karma than killing a real person. Pretty, right? I've got to check. I'm always a bit nervous when I'm sitting with the kind of sutta experts, kind of very strict Burmese monks. But no, definitely. So yeah. Whether it's a wholesome pastime, that's a different question. Now, how the effect that computer games have on your mind. Yeah, I would certainly say, and it links with your second question, mind and action, internal, external. Remember that any action of what's called vachikam and kayikam, so that means action of the speech and action of the body, always starts with or always springs from manogam, which means action of the mind, like the thought, the intention. So, like I say, I can't tell you the karmic, result. Like I say, this other question about karma, it's beyond me to say what is the karmic result actually of computer games, these kind of action kind of games. Like I said, I've never played them myself, so I can't speak personally that if you do it, this is how you feel. But I've heard that some Korean people play until they die, they stay in their room, they don't even answer their parents on the bedroom. But the point is, the violent side of it, I think definitely whatever you think, the Buddha said, whatever the mind inclines towards or thinks about, that becomes the inclination of the mind. It's like a slow tilting down. So I cannot imagine that violent video games are beneficial to a peaceful, happy mind or a peaceful, happy person. I just can't. Doesn't that make sense to you? Like, you don't have to ask a monk. Just ask yourself. Does it, even as a stress therapy, is it play snakes and ladders or Sudoku or something? It'd be better. It's just not so harmful. So that's specifically addressing the violence aspect, because especially from what I've seen and heard. These days, the computer imagery, the graphics is getting, amazingly realistic, and people's lives get completely obsessed by these games, or they get obsessed by them. And I can't imagine it's a wholesome way to be thinking, planning to kill this person, that person, shooting, the kind of violence associated with it. Because the mind and the way people think, the world, it's just one and the same. The first and the beautiful, beautiful Dhammapada verse, the Buddha said, Mano Bubangama Dhamma Manuseta Manomiya, is mind is the forerunner of things. Mind made our things. Mind is the chief. Basically, anything that the world creates, that humans do, has come from the human mind, which manifests through the body and through the speech. So I have actually quite strong feelings about these video games. I really think they're very, very harmful. And, again, along with all of this whole realm of, internet addictions of all kinds. But this one specifically talking about violence, I think it's linked. Of course, it's not the same as killing a real person. And people will always say, it's just fantasy, it's just play, or just, people will almost say it's better I kill somebody on screen than in life. Yeah, I would agree. But I think when you look at, the history of people who sometimes do carry out horrible crimes, a lot of the patterns now have been have been started online in games in their own fantasy world. And it's one of the reasons why people end up so frustrated in life, is because you're spending so much time online that you lose touch with reality, you don't have friends, you feel like a loner, you feel like an outsider, and you end up hating everybody, so it becomes what we call a self-fulfilling prophecy. So yeah, boleh berhenti.
Okay, Mike, please.
We talk about the 3 good practices. It is provide, evil, do good and train the mind. Must one follow the teaching of Buddha, or be a monk, or be a Buddhist to achieve that?
Yeah, not at all. That's what I said. Actually, these teachings, what I've been talking about, are not really Buddhist, or not uniquely Buddhist. We don't have the copyright. The Buddha doesn't have the copyright on avoiding evil, because the 5 precepts, or actually in this teaching, the Buddha went on. You see, it's the summary of all the teachings: patient endurance. One who harms, living beings is not, can't be called a monk or a samana, but it means like a spiritual person. Not to kill, not to injure, being restrained. Many of these principles, being devoted to seclusion, keeping quiet, keeping, restrained or quiet. So none of these are uniquely Buddhist concepts. I mean, there's nothing really in the teachings about, okay, now you bow to the Buddha, now you say this, now you pray like that, now you've got to recite this. Even the precepts and the going to refuge, those are part of it, but the Buddha wasn't like teaching people that you have to do this. This is what people do when they have faith. But if you ask me, like, you have to be a Buddhist or becoming a monk, you have to become a monk. The point is, I would say that I find it very, very beneficial and supportive. That's why we become monks, We don't need to, be very happy, it'd be very nice if you could do it whatever way you wanted. But the point is, this is a supportive environment for all of those principles. You see, I've got no money, so anything that you can do using money, we just can't do. So that cuts out a lot. And then we have our rules, and we live together, so there's no secrets in the Sangha. So you see how supportive this environment is for avoiding unwholesome. Literally, like I say, I can go back to my heart. The worst thing I can do is sleep all day, You see what I mean? If I keep the rules, and I come down, I have my meal, I go back up, it's very, very supportive. So that's the point. And even you could say being Buddhist, because especially in the West, there are lots of people who don't necessarily want to identify themselves as Buddhist. They feel like, well, I love the Dharma, I love the Buddhist practices. I can just do that. I don't have to be a Buddhist or identify or create this. It's even creating more of a self, more of an ego, more of a concept. I just be who I am, but not do the right thing, because it's about the action, not the label. But again, when you say, okay, Buddhang saranam gacchami, Dhammam saranam gacchami, Sangham saranam gacchami, that's really helpful, because you're making a mental, remember, it's like it starts with the mind. You're saying, this is my refuge, this is my direction, this is who I respect, this is who I listen to. So that's why it's useful, that's why it's beneficial. But if you ask me, do you have to? I say, no, there's nothing that says you have to. But I want to really emphasize, it's very, very supportive. And like I say, for me, why I became a monk was because I wanted to keep these 3 principles. And I realized in this life, in this day and age, the most supportive environment is the Sangha. Got no choice. If you want, it's like you want to, it's study something, you've got to try and find the best institute for that. So I felt that's the Sangha. But if you can't or you don't want to, that's fine. You've got to do your best. But it's harder because you're in a more challenging environment. We have our Bhikkhu Sangha Dukkha, we have our challenges, and then people have your challenges. But the Buddha set up this situation to provide the most supportive environment. So I can't deny it.
One more last question.
Good evening, Ajahn. Welcome back to Taiping after 15 years. The next 15 years you come back again, many of us will still be around. Okay, as Ajahn pointed out, there's quite a bit of suffering for us here. So a few months back, the bushfire in Australia did actually affect us, Malaysian, a lot. A few months later,
Sorry, it did or it didn't?
It did quite affect us because
Directly.
it's so far away.
Yeah.
Although we can feel the pain of the people there suffering, it doesn't really affect us here. Okay, so a few months later, coronavirus decided to pop up. With this latest thing, the fear come about, and then we get to see greed, hatred, delusion in play. So much so that it is so sad to see people, doing what they're doing right now. Okay, so the question is, as Dharma practitioners like us, what should we be looking at, more positively, and how should we do anything about it? That's my question.
You mean how to maintain a positive mind state now that we're being faced by what seems like a more imminent threat or more imminent challenge?
It's coming closer and closer to home,
Yeah.
because people are snatching up the mask,
Yeah.
the hand sanitizer,
Yeah.
and then the latest trend is like they're grabbing toilet rolls, and it's just amazing. You really get to see greed in play. So now, what's the positive view for Dharma practitioner? How we should be looking at this thing?
Mhm. Well, I think there's many aspects. One aspect is simply that, in a sense, people I think quite right to experience fear, because that's natural. When you have a threat that's coming close, especially one like this, the part of the fear is it's very unknown. Well, how long is the incubation period? Like, okay, who in this room has been with somebody who had contact with somebody in China, maybe Singapore, some of you from, it's not so far away in Malaysia. So this is the unknown factor, And of course, in this day and age, we're used to having cures for everything. And so something which doesn't have a cure, even if right now the numbers are low, everyone knows in the back of their mind it could just, multiply. And then what you're going to do? And of course, you see the news. The news will exaggerate or exaggerate the imminent sense for us. And then you see people wearing masks, and it feels weird. But I think it's important to acknowledge that on one level is okay and normal. It would be a strange society that was China's coronavirus, never mind, some you win, some you lose. People don't think like that. So, and the Buddha talked about being heedful. Apamado is one part of the Dhamma, being careful. So I don't think there's anything wrong with being careful, and it's just normal that people want to wear the mask, used to buy all the hand sanitizer. I don't know what toilet paper's for. Is that like making masks at home? Making masks at home. Homemade masks. So whatever, you know, I think there's a lot worse things that people are doing than worrying about this. As long as they're not, you know, you would say like additionally spreading panic or being like, for example, you know, nasty to people because of it. You know, it's just very normal in society. This is a society of, you know, greed, hatred, delusion actually means fear. That's one side or another side. Greed, hatred, it's all bound up with fear of loss. So being careful, being cautious, I think is okay and normal and to be expected in this kind of situation. And just got to have compassion for the people who are dying, the people in, you know, Wuhan is completely, like, from what I've heard, like locked up, and people trying to get home, families being separated, you know, because, okay, yeah, you're English, you can go home, but your Chinese wife has to stay. That's really tough. Yeah, it's really happening. So I think the thing to do is to generate compassion, like with all of these things. And just to be careful, just keep an eye on it, not get paranoid. Remember, there's still more chance you're going to have an accident on the way home. Much more dangerous if you go out drinking. For example, tonight, Friday, Saturday night, go to a place where there's alcohol. Much more chance you'll get in a fight or have somebody, you know, hit you than die from coronavirus, statistically speaking. Yeah, you know, you slip over in the shower is still greater possibility than getting coronavirus. But still being careful is okay. Then just have compassion. And in a sense, the two things, they are linked, as you know. Or put it this way, if you believe one version of events, you could call it the climate change influence, is that these things are quite linked. Is that, you know, fires in Australia is a kind of man-made thing. The whole industry, the kind of industrialization of the world, so things like viruses, and I think they're called pandemics, can just spread very, very quickly. People have limited immune systems. It's kind of breakdown. You know, it becomes part of a cycle. And so I think the Buddhist way to respond to all of these things is to just realize the kind of the potential for real dukkha that we've created, and this is only our own creation. And then ask yourself, okay, how am I going to respond to this? Again, it comes back to the same thing. How do we, as individuals, respond to it? Avoid evil, do good, train the mind. You see, it always comes back to the same principles. Or sila, samadhi, panya. This is the way to answer any question, any problem. Use the loving kindness and compassion. Train your mind, you know. And if you are working, for example, be careful. You know, don't think that life is all about just the internal world. Still be careful. Like, be careful when you drive. Be careful whatever you do. Be careful with coronavirus. I think it makes sense now. People who get coughs, get this, get that, go and get it checked. If you have it, you have it. If you don't, you don't, because you don't want to be part of the problem. It makes sense to me. But we don't have to panic. Now, you can't stop other people from panicking. You know, that is your question. But just keep calm, carry on, practice the Dharma, and if it gets worse, then yeah, be careful. Maybe it'll come to a point where people think shouldn't drive around, shouldn't come to public meetings. Be open to that possibility, that as a very simple, practical way of being safe, we might have to make some changes. You've got to just watch the next few months. Who knows what's going to happen? No need to blame anybody. Just respond appropriately. And it's absolutely in line with what the Buddha said. He talks about the body. When you have a body, it's bound up with disease. People say, oh, it was so negative. Buddhists always talking about aging, sickness, and death. No, but it's true. So make a Dharma lesson out of it. should give rise to this. Our friend over there who's saying he needs the motivation. Well, you know, how much more motivation do you need? You know, it's like it's really, the world is really on fire. And the Buddha said, burning with the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion. The fire we're in. The only question is, how do we quench that fire in our hearts? So I think it's a good place to stop tonight.
Thank you again, and we all together say a big sadhu. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So the night is not young anymore. Thank you everyone for coming, and especially.
So let us share the merit and the goodness that was accumulated by sharing the Dhamma, and listening to the Dhamma, and also all the other wholesome acts that we have accumulated throughout the day. And let us share the goodness, the wholesomeness with our departed relatives, friends, and all beings. And let us recite together. Idam me nyatinam hotu sukhita hontu nyatayo. Idam mo nyatinam hotu sukhita hontu nyatayo. Idam mo nyatinam hotu sukhita hontu nyatayo. Ekavata jam hei sampadam punya sampadam sabbe satta anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. And let us also make an inspiration so that all the good karma and the merit we have accumulated will also support us on our path to liberation, towards Nibbana. Please repeat after me. Idam me punyam. Idam me punyam. Asavakkaya. Asavakkaya. Mahang hotu. Mahang